Sometimes a news story comes along and you just think, how is this not the top headline all over the Western world? This is easily one of the biggest developments of the year, if not the past 30 years. And it just slipped out with virtually no one grasping its true implications. Last night, the unelected totalitarian EU just announced the world's first direct carbon tax on individuals. How is everyone not freaking out over this? EU approved CO2 tax on heating and transport. The new carbon price will apply to petrol, diesel and heating fuels such as natural gas. Beginning in 2027, they're going to start adding on carbon tax whenever you pay your heating bill or fill up at the pump. The new scheme will entail higher prices at the pump, up to 10.5 cents for a litre of petrol and 12 cents for diesel, according to a study by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research. Heating fuels like gas, heating oil and coal will see their prices increase as well. AFP confirms the agreement also aims to make households pay for emissions linked to fuel and gas heating from 2027. Of course, they'll start off small to get everyone used to it. Oh, just a tiny bit extra to save the planet. Then it's the slippery slope to an enviro-feudal hellscape. They're also imposing more of this on industries and energy companies, which will then just pass their costs on to the consumer. Dutch media outlet NOS confirms citizens and companies will have to pay for the CO2 from the exhaust and the chimney. This goes for energy companies and pumping stations. They have to pay for emission rights and then charge the costs to the customer who comes to fill up or turn on the gas heater. Michael Bloss, a Green lawmaker who took part in the final negotiations, said this: citizens in the EU must expect higher CO2 prices.
Resistance is futile.
They admit the talks were dragged out, quote, because of the political sensitivity of introducing what many will perceive as a new tax. But it was approved even against the advice of the chairman of the EU's own environmental committee, Pascal Canfin. Canfin said the proposal was, quote, politically suicidal and risked triggering a European-wide protest movement similar to the Yellow Vests in France. The Yellow Vest uprising began in rural areas as a revolt against fuel tax hikes and ended up paralysing the entire country. The technocrats themselves admit that this new carbon tax is so onerous and odious, they fear the reaction to it will be continent-level riots and civil unrest. What happened in the Netherlands is just a taste of what's to come. Authorities fired live rounds at Dutch protesters, including a 16-year-old boy. The clashes ensued after nationwide farmer protests against drastic green agenda nitrogen cuts which would see their livelihoods devastated. In order to comply with globalist technocratic rules on climate change cuts, farmers would be paid by the government not to produce food, while 30% of farms would be forced to close down for good. This war on farmers is also playing out in Germany and other European countries. To make this new carbon tax, quote, politically acceptable, the EU has promised a social climate fund to help with the costs, something that will obviously be later withdrawn once everyone is acclimatized to their new serfdom. And even the same technocrats behind this new carbon tax admit that this social climate fund won't be enough to soften the burden on households. And Americans, sorry to alarm you, but you're next. Climate reparations paid to the third world.
So back on the loss and damage fund, though, I mean, is there going to have to be U.S. taxpayer money that helps the United States? Presumably the United States is going to have to be one of the nations that contributes to.
Well, it'd be great if there were some.
Let's pause there and we'll come back after a word from the sponsor of this video. It's no exaggeration to say that things are getting scary out there. The Biden administration has already printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt just hit a record $30 trillion. And inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. They're basically burning your cash, torching your family's financial future. Are you going to let them destroy everything you've worked for? Or are you just going to sit back and become a victim of the deliberate decimation of your living standards? Are you just going to submit and eat the bugs? Don't do that. Or are you going to take positive action by safeguarding your economic security? Talk to my friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Go to paullikesgold.com and they'll give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account. That's paullikesgold.com. You've seen how much I get demonetized. The best way of supporting me is by supporting my sponsor. So click the link in the description for paullikesgold.com. Now back to the video. They say all this is necessary to secure a climate transition. Yet the only transition occurring is from your bank account to theirs. Oh, it's a great reset, all right. Resetting your bank balance to nothing. They call it net zero because that's the figure on your statement at the end of the year. Now they're linking your financial transactions to your carbon footprint in anticipation of more rationing and levies. Where's all the money going? Who's benefiting from this carbon indulgence cash cow? The very same globalist institutions responsible for pushing the climate hysteria hoax in the first place. We were called conspiracy theorists for years for warning that the ultimate endgame of the global warming scam was partly about restricting your personal movements.
That means actually some of us are told, well, you can't go on a plane. That's fine. That's part of the national plan.
And partly about imposing a huge new tax on living standards, representing another giant transfer of wealth from the people to the globalist political class. And now it's happening. They literally just announced it. And they had the nerve to do it all right in the middle of a cost of living crisis, where people are literally shivering inside their own homes because they can't afford to pay the energy bill, while many are facing the miserable choice between heating and eating this winter. Let's not forget that man-made climate change is the biggest racket ever known. The climate has always changed, long before man even dreamt of inventing the internal combustion engine. Arctic summer sea ice stopped declining a decade ago. There's just been a massive increase in the Greenland Arctic ice sheet. The South Pole just recorded its lowest ever November temperatures. New evidence revealed that temperatures in the US over the last 50 years were exaggerated by up to 50%. Every time they browbeat us about record high temperatures, turns out they were recorded on the tarmac at major airports. Climate models claiming evidence of rapid global warming are routinely proven to be grossly exaggerated. But it doesn't matter. It's not about the science. It's never been about the science. It's about power, money, and control. They have to ram through this carbon tax now, because despite all the propaganda, all the social engineering, a new global poll just found that climate change skepticism is actually increasing. It's all one massive scam. But that won't stop them from weaponizing it to carbon tax you into oblivion. So again, just think about this. The EU just announced a direct carbon tax on individual citizens, and they admit it will cause massive continent-wide civil unrest. How is this not the biggest story in the world right now? EU member states will still have to vote on all this in January or February, and that's just likely to be one giant rubber stamp. But given what we've seen in France, in the Netherlands, in Germany, it's guaranteed to cause a monumental people's revolt across Europe, and maybe that's the only thing that could possibly put a stop to it. Get early access to videos, exclusive live streams, and personally DM me. You've seen how much I get demonetized all the time. Well, this is how you support me. By subscribing at pauljosephwatson.locals.com. Please click the link in the description.